Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Coaching. My name is Kim Britz, international leadership coach, trainer, and leadership facilitator, and host of the Lunchtime series where we add value to people's lives happening every day at 12 o'clock, ebizradio.com. Today we're chatting to a man who is in business of building better businesses. He's a speaker, mentor, and challenger, William Buist. Welcome, William. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Kevin. Very nice to be here. Thank you.
So, William, to kick it off straight away.
So,
yeah. So to kick off today, tell us more about what it is you do and what it is we're going to be talking about today.
Of course, Kevin. Yes, thank you. So I work with business owners and business leaders who are keen to build a better business. You know, they know that they're doing great work, but they know that it could be better too. And they're looking for the strategies that are going to make the business stronger, more resilient, and more like the business they had in mind when they started it quite often. I think a lot of business owners start their business and it just gradually over time, it gets slightly different from their vision when they started, and they need a bit of strategy to get them back on track. So I talk about 5 pillars of strategy that I think every business needs to have. Starting with the business owner themselves and looking after their own mental resilience and physical well-being and those kinds of things. So they are critical to the business as the business owner. So looking after yourself and making sure you're in the best shape will help to make sure that your business is in the best shape too. And then we talk about the skills that they bring to the business, and often that's what makes the business unique. You know, my history is in insurance and risk management, and now it's in strategy for small businesses. And I've been doing that for 16 years. But that insurance history and that risk management history is still relevant today, but it makes me who I am, and that makes my business unique as well. We talk about systems and the automation and the way that you operate the business so that you have reliable, consistent outcomes. And last 2 things, looking outwards now and towards the market, we talk about the sales process that you have to make sure you've got a nice steady flow of the right clients who are delivering, you know, to you, being delivered to you reliably as well. And the signposting that you need, that's all about the communications, not just for marketing the business, but to talk to suppliers and associates and employees and creating a consistent message with the right information at the right time. So I talk about the journey that most businesses make and how they can get inadvertently locked into ways of working that take them away from their purpose. And, you know, if you're fighting fires rather than focusing on your purpose and strategic goals, that's when you need a really good strategy. You know, the fires do happen, it's inevitable. But if you've got good strategy, it's much easier to put them out and get moving again on the right things.
So you mentioned purpose, and I'd love it if you could just touch on this a little bit. Do you find that, you know, that's because, you know, according to textbooks, according to so many sources out there, very often people have a misguided idea of what purpose really is. They have it on a nice, you know, on their letterhead, or they'll have it out there in the foyer, and invariably purpose is something that gets dwindled, and the message and the inevitable reason behind why you do what you do in any case sort of gets put on the shelf and, you know, looked at it every other end of the year. And do you find that that's one of the key mistakes that businesses are making, especially, you know, in terms of making businesses better? Do you think that's really, really important?
I think it's a really interesting point, and I do. And I touched on the fact that a lot of businesses find they've moved away from what their original vision was over time. It's a bit like, you know, if you go into business to make mugs, you know, that you drink out of. Some customers may come along and say, "Oh, this mug's great, but can you make a saucer for it as well?" So you make a saucer, and then they say like, "Oh, well, can you make a whole tea set?" And so now you're making tea sets, and then they start asking you to make kettles as well. And now you've moved right away from pottery and you're making things with steel and using electricity. And you kind of wake up one morning and go, how did that happen? How did we get here when my passion is in making really beautiful mugs, and now I'm making utilitarian kettles. Something's gone completely wrong. And all of that is a set of decisions that each one is tiny, but moves you a little bit away from the original purpose of your business. And I think also that the purpose question, and we all know Simon Sinek talks about starting with why and all of these wonderful things that are really absolutely true. And if you can think about, why you're in business in the first place, a lot of things do become a lot clearer. But each of those decisions can be so small that it doesn't feel at the time like you're being taken off track. But then you kind of end up in treacle because it's not your core reason for being. It's not the thing that gets you up in the morning. And it literally stagnates you and drags you down. So doing the thinking to get to what really am I here to do? What is the thing that makes me, as I like to put it, I think if you can think of the things that make your heart beat faster and your soul soar, those are the things you should be doing.
Yeah. So one of the key questions as you're speaking and looking through the information that you've shared with me is getting into bad habits. We get into that sort of, you have a business and this is what's happening, and it almost has a moment of plateauing, and you kind of sort of start stretching out and doing the same old. What are some of those habits that businesses out there, a lot of people who listen to the show and want to tune in are often looking for answers, and COVID hasn't been anyone's friend in terms of what impact it has had. But inadvertently, it has forced people to really start questioning how they do what they do and what is more effective than last year and the year before. So in terms of habits, what do you think some of those key things are that businesses should really start paying attention to when considering 2021?
Well, there's a, gosh, that's a massive subject, Kevin. We could talk for hours on that question. But I think to pick some of the key points of what you just said out and think about the bigger things, I think COVID has been very interesting, and I've seen, there are certainly sectors and businesses where the effect of COVID and lockdowns, all over the world. I mean, you see this almost in every country, although different approaches have produced different results. And I think, in a few years' time, we'll look back at that history and point at some of the decisions that were taken, in New Zealand or Sweden or the UK and question some of them and agree with others. History will be kinder to it than right now when we don't really know what's going on. So I'm loath to talk about, mistakes that are made in the jaws of a crisis are often beyond the control of business owners. But what that says to me is that thinking about crises before they happen, working out what you will do if things happen that you don't control, so that when something does happen that you don't control, you don't go into a blind panic. And what I've seen through COVID is the businesses that have done that kind of planning, and they couldn't predict COVID per se, but there are some aspects of that we can all plan for. We can all plan for what happens if most or all of our clients decide at the same time to go somewhere else. How would we manage losing a big chunk of our revenue all at once? And that's it. It doesn't matter what the cause is. The question is, what do you do if that happens? And I've seen businesses that have got good plans for that say, right, in that situation, this is what we would do. And for my own business, I learned that lesson in the 2008 banking crisis. My business was, heavily dependent on a few clients that were reasonably large companies at that time. And the banking crisis came along, and basically all the projects I was working on stopped. And I made a mistake at that point of saying, well, this is short term, it won't last long, because it lasted 3 or 4 years. And what I learned was actually you have to act quickly. You have to look at what are your skills. And this is why I think skills are such a key pillar of strategy. And how can you bring those skills to bear in the world you now find yourself, as opposed to the world you were in? So I was working with larger businesses on a project basis. And in 2008, what I did was shift my business into working with slightly smaller businesses, with the business owners in those businesses as a mentor, as a business mentor. And that meant, rather than doing project work, which could just stop, I'm now working with them to share the knowledge and experience that I have to help them to build that same resilience. So looking at what are you good at, and what do you really enjoy doing, and how can you take that to market? Because there are always different ways to do that. And being flexible and adaptable in the things you can flex and adapt, but being really focused on what you're good at and sticking to that, I think, are the key things that have got the businesses that have done, I wouldn't say they've done well out of COVID, but they're getting through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you say use the word adaptable. In NLP, there's a presupposition that we use, the law of requisite variety. In layman's terms, it says he who is most adaptable to change and can practice that often is the one that rules the system. And when you look at that, you kind of go, yeah, the more adaptable we are, and specifically when COVID's happened, we're actually doing ourselves a favor by really stretching and coming up with new solutions. But that's, leads me to one of the questions that I'm thinking, listening to you now, is how important does innovation and resilience play in building a better business? Like being on the forefront of going, okay, cool, I realize that my purpose is to sell mugs. How then do I get to innovative, and how do I start really knowing that I'm on the forefront of selling mugs? Do you know what I mean?
No, and I think you've touched on something really interesting here, and I think it's almost about maturity of business and how mature a business is. And I don't mean maturity in the sense of just being around for a long time. It's more about mindset of maturity. And I think, when small business owners start their business, guilty as charged here, when I started my business, I kind of knew what I was good at, what my skills were, but there was an awful lot I didn't know about running a business. But I kind of, we muddle our way through it, don't we? We're what I like to call explorers almost. We're hacking through a jungle, finding out things, and sometimes we go down dead ends and we do the wrong thing. And we start to learn and learn how to run the business properly. We get the accounting sorted out, we get the marketing sorted out, we get the customer service sorted out, all things that perhaps are not our core skill, not the thing that we do. And all those support the thing that we do. We get all that working, and we become kind of practitioners at our business, at what we do. So, we might then be making really good standard mugs, plain white mugs, maybe like this one, nothing special about it. Nice mug. I don't make mugs, by the way, just to be clear. But then, being a practitioner is fine, and we can have a really good, solid business as a practitioner, doing what we do, doing it well. But the chances are we're in a very competitive market. Whatever it is we do, there'll be other people who are also good at the sorts of things we do. And so we're competing with them. And competition is great because it does two things. It drives down the price and opens up the market. So it drives down the price because there's competition. But because the price comes down, the market gets bigger. More people can afford that service or that product. And so you've got more opportunity to deliver it. So you can exist perfectly well at that sort of level of practitioner, doing what you do well. But some people move on and they become experts at what they do. They take it a stage further. They start teaching what they do to others. Now, they may do that because they're expanding the business and employing people and teaching them the skill that they have. Or it may be that they choose to switch into being more of a trainer as what they do. Doesn't really matter. The point is they're passing on their knowledge now to other people. And they also become innovative. They look at ways they can take the skill that they've got and hone it with a bit of nuance. So they might take this white mug and start putting logos or designs on it and selling it that way to add more value, and so on. But I think there's a layer beyond that, and it's what I would call mastery. And the masters in a market are the ones that, you know, when they walk into a room, people kind of know that they are really solidly at the top of their game.
Yeah.
And what they tend to do is that they don't tend to do the work as much anymore, although they will still do it because they need to keep their hand in, as it were. But what they're tending to do is to help other people to become what they are. It's more about identity. So, you know, a master photographer will be taking beautiful photographs, but he'll also be helping other people to be a photographer. They won't be telling them what the settings on the camera need to be. They'll be telling them what it takes up here to be a photographer. And I think that to me is where the innovation takes you. If you're innovative and thinking at the boundary of what your skills are and at the boundary of your market, you become a master of what is contained within that over time. But you have to keep pushing the boundary. You have to keep making mistakes and seeing what works and what doesn't, and looking for the opportunity just to take it up a level. And that's a mindset thing, not a practitioner thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's, you know, when you say boundary, one of the key things that I always do in any training or any coaching or any facilitation for that matter, is always bringing to the awareness around where the end of that boundary is. And invariably, people very often don't realize that the degree of your change is really the degree of your learning. And very often they don't know that, or they don't realize it in the moment, because you know, kick into panic mode, or like, I just don't want to do this is uncomfortable. But the moment you wrap your brain around, okay, if this was a learning moment, what am I learning? What am I learning? What am I? And because of that discomfort and that boundary that's been pushed, you really are in a state of learning.
Yeah, and I think exactly, and it's, you know, we can learn a little from things that go really well, but we learn an awful lot from things that have gone badly. And they don't have to go badly to the point of view of destroying, you know, what you have at all. It's just that they don't work optimally. I don't know if you just yesterday, as we're recording this, it's the day after the Grand Prix in Bahrain, where there was a really serious accident right at the beginning of the race, but the driver walked away from it. Now, I mean, the interesting thing here is that the accident was bad enough to tear the car into two pieces. Wow. And it burst into flames immediately, and he was inside the fireball for about 20 seconds before he was able to get himself out. And he's walked away from that accident with a few burns to his hands and his neck, which are the only bits of exposed skin there were. And you know, he hit a barrier at incredible speed. And you think that's actually as a result of that sport, looking at all of the accidents where people have died in the past and learning from them and building in extra safety and building in new design and building in ways to make it a safe, still a risky sport, but still a much safer sport. And I think that lesson for business is to think about, you know, hopefully the things that happen in your business that are not as good as you'd like them to be are not so bad that somebody is, you know, having their life threatened. But equally well, everything that goes wrong is to look at it really hard and say, what caused that? What was the trigger for it? And could that happen again? And if it could happen again, how can I design it differently so that that thing can't happen, whatever it is? So, you know, I talked a little bit about 2008 and the banking crisis. And you know, so when COVID came along this year, I'd already got those plans in place. And I looked at COVID, and when we went into the first lockdown in the UK, you know, I lost a few clients because they're involved in businesses which simply did not have any business at that point because they were locked down. And I looked at that and said, okay, we've been here before. We know what happens when we think, if we let that thought of, this is only going to be 2 or 3 weeks, it'll be fine when that's over, because I don't think it will be. And I've, you know, unfortunately, I've been proved right with that. So what I did was to implement the plan, and the plan was, like, now put more marketing out there, get noticed more by more people, and pick up the phone to all my existing and past clients just to have a conversation of, are you okay? How's this affecting you?
Yeah.
And those conversations led to opportunities, not necessarily just for me, but led to opportunities for them as well, because of people I know that I was able to put them in touch with. So that collectively, just by having that process of, I need to be in touch with everybody and as many people as possible, because this is one of those times when we need to be thinking together, not thinking independently. And that's really helped me to keep my business, reasonably stable through the whole of COVID, and I hope that of my clients too.
That's amazing. So, William, one of the things that if you look at the elections happening in the US at the moment, if you look at a lot of questions that are about the importance of inclusion and diversity within your strategic plan. Don't you want to just touch on that as well? In aim of building a better business, why is this important?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because to me it is one of the most important questions of our age. And the Black Lives Matter movement is one symptom of the fact that we still have enormous disparity in the way that different groups are being treated, not just in terms of race, but in terms of religion, in terms of disability, gender, and so on. There's all sorts of ways that people can put others into a box and treat them in a different way without really, I don't think, my experience is almost everybody I meet has no intention to discriminate, and yet there is still enormous discrimination in the world. So something isn't working here. And I think how businesses turn up in the world, how they behave day to day, is dependent on their history, it's dependent on their intentions, it's dependent on the makeup of the people in them and their psychology and all of those things. And I think diversity and inclusivity, and they are different things, and we need to remember that they're different things. We tend to lump them together as one, and often people use that diversity and inclusivity as if it was one thing, and it's not. It's at least two, and it's probably many more things than that. But by having sight of it, by bringing it up as a topic, what we've done is allowed the cultural things that exist in businesses to be exposed to, whether or not they support or encourage diversity, and whether they support and encourage inclusivity. And I think that those things touch every business. But there's lots of evidence that more diverse businesses have a better result. There's lots of evidence that being inclusive enables you to expand the markets you sell into. It enables you to bring wider skills into your business. It enables you to see alternative ways to do what you do, some of which you may never think of because of your cultural history and your own biases. And we're all biased. We all have biases. The question is, are we aware of them? Do we know what they are? Do we know how they turn up? Do we know how they feel when we're applying them? And lots of things like that. And if you know that you've got a bias, then you can take action to minimize the impact of that bias. And there are lots of them, not just in diversity and inclusivity. Google is a real criminal in a sense of helping people with one of the biggest biases we all suffer from, which is confirmation bias. That we believe something is true, we then go and Google it from the point of view of it being true, and because Google is an index, not a source, it comes back with all the things that match the search that you've put in. And if your search assumes truth, it's going to come back with all the things that assume truth as well, whether they're true or not. So it could be on any subject really, but if you Google things, I always like to think, just negate the question. So if you're Googling, is Brexit a good thing? You'll get lots of stuff that say it's a good thing. If you negate the questions, is Brexit a bad thing? You'll get lots of stuff that say it's a bad thing. Now, then you can look at both sides of that argument and see whether there's something in the other side. But most people, because they're short of time, don't have the time to do that kind of research. And so they Google, is this a good thing, whatever that this is. They get lots of evidence that says it is, and they therefore believe that that's the right thing. So if you've got people who think that they're not, they don't have an issue with diversity because they're doing enough, or they think they're doing enough for inclusivity, and they check themselves against their market with an assumption of truth, that's what they're going to see. And I think that's the next biggest issue that we have, is not that diversity and inclusivity isn't an issue, because people now recognize it is, but that they see it in the true light of day as to how well they're doing, and how a lot of, you know, very subtle signals that they may be giving off because of some unconscious bias or prejudice that they still hold, can impact people in ways they hadn't thought of. And I think that's about leadership, and particularly for leaders charged with strategy, they need to think about those issues really openly, and start really. I think the best leaders start from the premise that they're wrong, not that they're right. They start from a premise of, if I eliminate all the ways I could be wrong, what's left will be the thing to do. And that's a much better way, in my opinion, particularly on diversity and inclusivity, to approach the problem. You know, rather than saying, are we doing enough, is to say, what else can we be doing? What more? Because it's in all our interest to do that.
I love that you bring that up. Bias is, it really is a conversation a lot more people should have as well. And I'm just thinking of confirmation biases. Even though you may be aware of the confirmation bias, if you are not aware enough of how this plays out in your environment, when it comes to strategy or innovation or cultural diversity, you may be struggling, because based on the fact that confirmation bias exists. And if you don't invariably ask yourself questions about this the whole time, you may just get stuck thinking that you're absolutely fine and nothing's ever going to happen, or you're ticking all the boxes. And based on the fact that we know confirmation bias is a thing and it's real and it's there, we should be able to consider it more readily, right? William, and this is such an interesting conversation. I could chat to you for another hour. So to conclude today's conversation, what advice would you say you would leave with businesses out there? Part of wanting to kick 2021 off and kind of go, yes, we're going to kick some butt and we're going to make a difference. If you could leave us with three points on what, or three pieces of advice on what people could be doing or considering, what would that be for 2021?
Fantastic question. Thank you, Kevin. I think the real issue with that is finding the right three things out of a myriad of things you could do. So I'm going to distill it down to the things that I think are really, really important. And the first is to get real clarity on where you want to be, not next week or next month or next year, but in 4 or 5 years' time. What does a better business look like to you as a business owner? For some people, that will be a bigger business with more employees, greater turnover, all of those things. For some, it will be more reliable, giving them more time and less stress. Whatever it is, work out what that looks like. Don't worry if you have no idea how to get there. Just get that vision clear. So that's the first thing. Have the long-term goal really clear. I tend to work in around about 7-year cycles. So I've just actually reset my vision for the next 7 years. I'm 62 now. In 7 years' time, I'll be 69. I'm probably going to be winding down how hard I work at that point. So I now want to really make a difference to what I leave behind me. It's kind of legacy piece. So I'm busy writing a book. I've got other things going on. It's that kind of thing. I don't know how to get all of the things I want done, but I know some of the pieces. So that's the first thing. Get that clarity in the distance. The second thing is then to work that back and say, what does that mean I need to do in if I'm working on a 7-year cycle, so I come back in years. I say, what does that mean I need to be doing in 6 years, in 5 years, in 4 years, in 3 years, in 2 years, and so on. And then for the last bit, that gives me a flavor for where the business needs to be in about a year's time. And then I look at that in terms of quarter by quarter this year. So breaking down just to get me back to what do I need to do today to start that journey. And I know that when I've gone for a quarter and reflect on where we've got to, the goal's going to look different. It's just like when you know, if you walk through the countryside, you kind of see 3 or 4 fields ahead of you, and you know roughly where you're going. You get to the end of the first field, and then you can see that there's not a gate in the far wall of the second field, so you have to take a different route. Running a business is just like that, but you still have the goal in mind. So you might have to turn left or turn right to get there from where you thought you were going to go, but you still got the end goal in mind. So those are the first 2 things. Think in the distance, break it back down to what you need to do today. And the third one, and I think possibly the most important, is don't try to do it on your own. You know, this is work that needs help from others, and don't be afraid of asking for help. You know, the one thing I've noticed over the years is that when you genuinely ask for help transparently, because you know that this is something you can't do yourself, that's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of real strength. And having clarity around what you can do and what you need others to help you with is a real strength. So, you know, work with other people who can really support you and help you get to where you want to get to. And doing those 3 things, great vision in the distance, clarity around what that means right now, and asking for help to make that happen will build you a better business every day.
I love that. And I love that, you know, breaking it down into segments from 6 years all the way down to 1 to quarters. It's almost like engineering backwards. You kind of go, okay, well, that's the thing, and how do I do that? What is the practical behavior associated to do that? So if anybody wants to get hold of you, what is I mean, obviously we're going to put all this information in the YouTube video and on the information we share. But what's the quickest way we can get hold of you if we want to?
Well, the great thing about Google being an index and me having an unusual name, so my name is William Buist, it's Buist at the end. If you just Google me, you find me. So you find me on Google, but the website is williambuist.com, and my email is william@williambuist.com. So they're all very easy to get hold of me, and I'd be delighted to talk to anybody who's got a question about anything we've said today about building a better business.
Fantastic. I'm just going to leave everyone with a nice quote from John C. Maxwell, and he says, a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. It's Lunchtime Coaching every day at 12 o'clock on ebizradio.com. William, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for joining me. It was such a pleasure to chat to you, and thanks for connecting.
A pleasure, Kevin, and a delightful conversation too. Thank you very much.
Have a lovely day. Thanks so much. Cheers. Bye-bye.